I want to welcome everybody to the February meeting of the Greater Houston Aquarium Club. Diana's going to keep me in line, make certain I'm in frame. I want to thank David and Kimber for having us here at Urban Aquatics. Everybody give them a huge round of applause. Hey, I'll tell you what, those benches are just amazing. Hands down, usually we don't have cool seating. Honestly, we want to make certain and welcome him as a new sponsor. It's really exciting. Hopefully everyone can kind of see where they're located. Swing by, stop in. I know he's increasing his freshwater stock, and his saltwater is definitely on point. It's amazing stuff. Yeah, the store always looks amazing. Swing in, send some people his way. If you can take the time tonight, go on to his Facebook page and leave a review. Tell everybody what you think. Honestly, those reviews make a big difference. When someone's looking around and they see 15, 20 different reviews by different people all over Houston saying how great a store is, you go, you know what, I might swing by. So please do that. Everybody's got name tags, so feel free to talk or act like you know me, or whether you don't. You just say, hey, Roy. Yeah, we're trying to work on some things, so yeah, kind of create that kind of family atmosphere. Today's meeting topic is on Biotope. Oh, do we? Yeah. Yeah.
Do we have anybody here that's here for the first time to one of our meetings? Wow.
Hey. Yeah, thank you. And if you want to engage with any of us, we're all kind of, open.
And if you don't like touch, just do this.
Today's meeting will be on biotopes in general. And I know that we both kind of approach biotopes and everyone approaches biotopes in their own sort of way. I mean, to me, what a biotope is, and to someone else, it can be a very, very broad thing. Like, I have a South American tank. Now, all those fish are from South America, or it could be as specific as a middle Tapajos region bank tank. It could be very specific, it could be very broad. I mean, literally in one stream, I'm certain that you guys have gone, or some of you have gone on our wild collection trip. One little spot of a stream, you'll yield a whole bunch of one type of fish, and then 15, 20 feet away, you get something different. So each one of those, when I kind of envision an aquarium that's a biotope, it's trying to replicate that little thing in your aquarium. So it can be a broad thing, like I'm doing a West African theme, or it could be very specific to a certain river in a certain, country, and in this exact point of that river. It can be kind of broad or kind of vague. And it can apply to both freshwater and saltwater, or brackish water. Literally, you're just kind of reproducing that inside of an aquarium. I know I will be talking about some freshwater biotopes. I think a lot of us tend to see certain types of tanks reproduced, and oftentimes when we see those tanks, we imagine that that's what it looks like. I want everyone to raise your hand if you've seen an amazing discus aquarium with swords, with gorgeous Amazon swords just ripping out and swimming amongst the gorgeous plants. All right, that is a gorgeous aquarium, and nowhere in the wild do you ever see discus and plants. Just FYI. It's all black water. Literally the water looks like tea. You're just not going to see that. Not a whole lot of light gets through that canopy. So sometimes when we see that aquarium, we go, that must be what it's like down in the Amazon. It's all verdant and growing. And you go, wait a minute. No, discus don't live around plants. They might have some floaters up top with roots that hit them occasionally, but usually they're pretty, they live in a certain kind of area. So just because we envision it doesn't always translate to what that's like. I see Varroris burgettis, and they're just a gorgeous little fish, chili rasboras, and they look gorgeous in a nice planted nano. But if you go to where they're found, it looks like a tea-colored little stream with a whole bunch of leaves and a bunch of little fish darting in and out of it. That's pretty much where they come from. Like that's where they live. So whenever we approach it, I have found what I tend to do. A biotope is really trying to reproduce both plants, fish, substrate, water parameters, even detritus. There's a lot of leaves. If you can find leaves from that region, that would be awesome. A lot of times we didn't have that option for many, many moons, but places like Tannin are opening those doors, and we're actually able to start seeing some more of those things. Oftentimes I can find a fish or a couple fish that are from that region, and I kind of centralize it either around the fish or around a plant. But choose one thing that's easily accessible. The rest can be on your wish list. But if you can't find a plant or a fish, then you're going to have a rough time stocking this. Find one thing at least that you can actually get a hold from that area. Then start really digging in. Find pictures of the creeks. Start doing Google image searches. Start looking at collection points. A lot of times you can find some really odd collection point data. Some crazy ichthyologist wrote a whole paper on digging through this creek down in Manaus. It's all online. It's just, you just got to find it. And then you go, whoa, dude. He's got a huge list of every species, and he's got little pictures of all the stuff he's caught. And that can kind of, you get to see the creek that it's found in. Then you can kind of go, all right, how am I going to reproduce that? I found that in freshwater, substrate is a real challenge. A lot of times we go, I want white moon sand, or I want black moon sand, because it's really stark. But never in the wild do you find white moon sand or black moon sand. It's mostly just kind of chunky rocks mixed with smaller rocks, and then it kind of folds into sand. Or it's all kind of just natural colored sand. Believe it or not, I have always found that PFS or just kind of natural sand, I've been amazed. I went and collected some sand from Spring Creek, and dude, it looks amazing. Dude, you know how much it cost me? Nothing. Other than getting the leeches out, dude, I was good. And mixing a few together gives you an interesting gradient that you see in the wild that you just have a hard time seeing. You can't go buy a bag. Carob Sea's going to go, I need exactly this amount of microns, and it's all uniform. That's cool, but it's like seeing one large rock that's jet black with PFS sand. Where did that sand come from? That sand came from breaking down those rocks. If there's all black rocks there, then you know what color that sand's going to be? It's probably not going to be white. It's just the way that nature works. So, trying to watch your little things like that can sometimes be a trick whenever you're achieving that kind of illusion. that this is a kind of natural spot. Now, I love seeing a nice kind of wild, crazy tank like a Biotope that's just pretty much been given willy-nilly, but this is also something that's going to go in your house. So having some sort of aesthetic appreciation, you know, I'm certain that your little neon steepidins really like algae, but dude, letting the algae cover the front glass so you can't see those cute little fish, it can't be effective either. So you've got to have kind of a middle ground there, where it's aesthetically pleasing, yet it kind of reproduces that kind of wilderness area. Choosing something that inspires you. Find a fish that inspires you. If you're trying to go for a biotope, avoid very tank bred, ornate kind of hobby strains. Long fin zebradanios do not look exactly normal. That's not how they look in the wild. It will look odd. Koi angelfish, not how they're naturally found in the wild. It will look weird. Those are some little things. Find something, even if it is bright. I think one that I wanted to talk about today was a gorgeous fish, lends itself easily to nanos. I mean, arguably, this is, in my opinion, the first nano fish that I ever came across in the hobby, before nanos were cool. Back in the 80s, everybody had cherry barbs. You couldn't give away cherry barbs. Everybody had them. They were really bright. They were bulletproof. So we got a bulletproof fish, doesn't get too big, and is amazingly colored. Those only come from Sri Lanka. They're actually their own like little odd genus that they kind of got separated, and there's not much else. There's a handful of other barbs, a few Dawkinsia. There's the tire track eel. There's a couple of odd zipper loaches, but really kind of developing a tank off of cherry barbs, reproducing a stream out of Sri Lanka is achievable. And you don't have to have all these other things that would get too big for that. Now, in the wild, you could probably reproduce cherry barbs and a big tire track eel, but I'm going to guess that 48-inch eel will probably eat a large amount of the tiger barbs. But, you know, kind of getting some natural-looking sticks, some driftwood, a few small rounded rocks, mixing great. Don't all get the same size rock, and then just put a whole bunch of them, because then it looks weird. It doesn't look natural. Nature is imperfect, so kind of mixing that and kind of giving that flow and feel of the tank will really effectively convey that. And honestly, a natural-looking cherry barb looks amazing. You know, give them a little bit of tea stain to the water, and they will just love it. You know, mix in some RO to achieve that kind of numbers. Give them some good filtration. You know, start searching. What are the streams like in Sri Lanka? Where are they found in Sri Lanka? You know, is it the eastern part? Look into those cities. What are those little creeks like? I bet you can find some pictures, and then all of a sudden, it will inspire you. You know, do the leaves of those trees look like guava leaves? Well, hunt down about a half pound of dried guava leaves. You know, sprinkle them into the tank. Let them fall naturally. It will give you an effect. You know, another one that I don't often see is Australia. I love rainbows. Rainbows are gorgeous. There's not a lot of options in Australia. We have a bunch of huge fish, you know, Australian lungfish, Jardinis, you know, some of these big monster predators. But for smaller tanks, you know, choosing some rainbows, some pseudomugals, and maybe some empire gudgeons, all of a sudden now you have multiple layers in the tank. You have kind of everything going on, and you've got basically like a North Queensland sort of biotope. Kind of look into those billabongs there. You know, start doing some image searching. Get some nymphaea, some lilies coming up. Don't worry about it too hard of a fast of a flow. And all of a sudden, this tank emerges, and you can sit back and go, "That's Northern Australia," and you can actually see it. You can feel it. It's a fun tank. I definitely recommend it. When you approach it, I know that David will probably talk a little more about this, but a lot of these species, when you start doing that research of where they're found together in the wild, so they naturally come across each other numerous times. So this propensity for aggression or weirdness that you might get with mixing fish from Northern Australia, Africa, and I don't know, Central Mexico. They've never come across each other. They've never even seen anything that looks like that. That is really weird. So they don't know how to behave, and a lot of their social cues can get mixed signals. The way that Malawi cichlids show dominance versus how South American and Central American cichlids show dominance is completely different. What might look like aggression to one might look like submission to another. And you get kind of mixed signals and they get confused. There are certain cues that they have passed along that if you flare up your face and go at me, then that means that you want to fight. Whereas in Malawi, they don't do that. They kind of subvert and go head down. Just depends. Knowing that those cues allows the fish to interact more naturally. So I think that is all I've got on freshwater. So I will turn it over to Mr. David Rains and discuss saltwater.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about saltwater biotopes, mainly reefs. A lot of people, whenever they come into my shop, they'll come in and they'll kind of just start looking over corals, and they don't really ask where it's from or where the fish is from. So they don't know what they're putting in their tank, unless I tell them you shouldn't mix that because it's from a certain area and it's not going to mix well with this fish, vice versa. So I'm going to piggyback on Roy's point. You take fish from different regions and you stick them in a tank with each other. It's kind of like taking somebody from America and sticking them in China and expecting them to be not stressed out. So it's the same kind of deal. So when you do that, your stress levels are going to rise for all of your fish because none of them are going to be comfortable. They're not going to know if this fish is a predator or if it's a community fish or how the hierarchy is going to work in the tank. So a lot of times you'll get ick outbreaks, you'll get aggression, all kinds of problems by mixing fish and coral from different regions. Another problem is, you have different bacteria that affect coral and fish and different funguses. All that kind of stuff, when you mix it together and it's from one region or another, it can decimate either or. So say you have like a flesh-eating bacteria with the order of coral that came in from Australia, and you have an order from Indonesia in the same system. That flesh-eating bacteria might not affect the corals from Australia, but it'll destroy the corals from Indonesia overnight. Because the corals from Indonesia don't have the natural, immunity to it. Similar to when the Europeans came to North America and indigenous people were wiped out from disease. Same thing. Corals and fish don't have vaccines, so it's really important to make sure that when you mix fish and coral, you're paying attention to where it's coming from. Or if you do mix them, you need to quarantine them properly. So you're not introducing a foreign, sickness or bacteria or fungus to another group of coral. As far as reef biotopes go, I try to stick with a lot of people will stick with acros or small polyp stony corals all together and they won't put any LPS in because they think they can't mix the two. But if you take all acro from Australia and you take large polyp stony corals from Australia, you can mix them in the same tank, and they won't kill each other. But if you take acro from Australia and LPS from Indonesia and mix them together, the chemical warfare between them is different. So the toxins that these corals release will probably kill the Australian acros, but the toxins that the Australian LPS would release wouldn't kill the Australian acros because they have an immunity to it. They're used to it. So really, with saltwater, you have to be really cautious with what you mix. Quarantine is very important, obviously. I recommend quarantining all fish for a reef tank or even a saltwater fish only tank for 4 to 6 weeks minimum. If you can, some people can't, but that's the proper way to do it. What I try to focus on whenever I prepare a reef tank for my customers is I'll ask them what they like, and I look at it and I say, okay, they like more LPS corals, so I'll find a region of LPS corals and I'll show them the pictures of the LPS corals from that region and let them pick out what they like, and then I'll introduce some SPS corals that are from the same region that won't chemically fight with the LPS and vice versa, so that they can actually stay with each other in the ecosystem that you're creating in the aquarium. So the main thing is, Roy said nature's imperfect, but it's perfectly imperfect. So everything in nature is beautiful. And you can't. What I try to do when I create any kind of scape is I try to mimic nature, because that's the way everything is meant to be. It's been millions of years. It's all come down the line, went this way or that way, and it's where it is now. And it's not because it was an accident. So that's probably the main point I would like to put across for biotopes. Reef biotopes, it's a little more important because you have a lot more that you're dealing with as far as chemical warfare between corals and fish. And reef fish, you have a lot of aggression. I mean, even the small fish are really aggressive. Damsels, you can get damsels from, the coast of California and Mexico, and you put them in the tank with damsels from Fiji, and the ones from California and Mexico are going to destroy the ones from Fiji. And if you take damsels from Indonesia and mix them with damsels from the Philippines, they're going to fight because they don't know each other. It's the same way as it is in freshwater. So another fish that I would say is pretty finicky as far as mixing different types is anthias from Hawaii or from Indonesia or even Southeast Asia. All these different anthias, they have different types of diseases and everything. And anthias are a schooling fish normally. So you have to have a male and at least 5 to 7 females for that group of anthias to be comfortable, because that's how they are in nature. If you were to look where anthias are in Hawaii, you're going to see giant schools of them, and there'll be 4 or 5 males and the rest of them will be females. And if they're not in harems in a tank, then they don't do well. They stress out and they end up slowly dying one by one because it's foreign to them. So I think the main point to get across in the biotope is to do your research and make sure that you're properly setting up your fish for success instead of just throwing stuff together and hoping for the best. Does anybody have any questions?
Because wherever they are in the ocean, or the equator, like let's say you're talking about taking a fish from, let's say this fish is in maybe northern hemisphere, maybe this fish is in more southern hemisphere.
That's another thing. Different different areas in the planet, wherever these bodies of water are going to have different water temperatures as well. Same thing with freshwater. You can have cold water species, warmer water species that do horrible, and vice versa.
I know we keep seeing Gymnogeophagus pop up occasionally, and that usually spawns a lot of questions because people start going, why don't we see these more often? And believe it or not, you can keep going down into South America far enough and you'll get cold. Like, it's just like North America. You know, not everything is Houston. Not everything is Houston. If you keep going north, you'll get colder. And gymnogeos are one that actually need that cool down period of 2 to 3 months to mimic a winter because they're more Paraguayan, Uruguayan.
Yeah, it's the same way on reefs. Like if you have Australian coral, most people will run their reef tanks at 78 to 80 to 82 degrees. Right? Australian coral, the temperature over there is like 76. So the other thing with moving fish or coral into a different temperature range is you're changing their entire metabolism. So, you know, you hear people say, like, if you get anthias, you have to feed them several times a day. Well, in Hawaii, it's cold water, and the anthias are swimming nonstop in giant, you know, very turbulent waters. So they're spending a ton of energy trying to keep their body temperature warmer while also swimming nonstop. In a fish tank, you're gonna, even if you make the water colder, they're not going to be swimming as much as they are in the ocean. So you kind of have to, when you get in a group of anthias, you have to basically feed them like they are in the ocean for a couple of weeks until they start getting used to not eating so much and their metabolism starts changing. If you don't do that, if you just keep feeding them 5 times a day, they're going to get overweight and they're going to start getting sick because it's just like Houston, let's say Houston. One of the fattest cities in America. Eat too many cheeseburgers, you're gonna get fat. So it's the same way in fish. You can give fish health problems by overfeeding as well.
Yeah, fatty liver. And
Now, one more question. How about like I'm gonna use a clownfish and anemone, but how many other fish have a symbiotic relationship?
Oh man.
Do they need to be kept that way? Like if I have a biotope with clownfish, do I need an anemone or do I need to?
So it depends on if you get wild caught clownfish, they're going to be way more comfortable having an anemone to host. If they don't have it in the wild, they always have anemones. They're not swimming around by themselves because there's predators that are going to eat
swoop in.
The anemone is what protects them in the ocean. Now, if you have a bunch of captive raised clownfish that have been, 10 generations captive raised, they're not going to know what an anemone is, and if they touch one, it's going to sting them. So, for example, if I took some of these black ice clownfish and threw them in a little bowl with an anemone and they touched it, it would sting them really badly at first. You'll see their color change on their skin. It's just like if you get stung by a jellyfish.
Right.
The same thing's happening to them because they're not used to it at all.
I would think, oh wow, they should go together. So.
Yeah, they should, but since they've been captive raised so many generations outside of nature, nature isn't normal to them. So
And
you
also,
kind of have to let them. Yes. So, like what I normally do with captive raised clownfish to get them to host an anemone is I will put, say like a 5-gallon tank with a big anemone and 2 clownfish, and I'll just leave them in there and feed them for a couple of weeks. Finally, eventually they're going to run into that anemone and get stung, and then they'll swim around and they'll be normal again, and then they'll go back over and they'll get stung, and then they'll swim around and get normal, and then they'll figure out, hey, that actually kind of feels pretty good. And they're attracted to it. It's like a drug to them. They can't stop touching it. So eventually they'll be in it and they'll be just rolling around in it like they're on some kind of drugs. And it's cool to watch them because of that. I mean, symbiotic relationships also aren't only with clownfish and anemones. You have shrimp gobies. So you can have a pistol shrimp and a shrimp goby paired together, and they basically protect each other in the wild. They'll create a structure that they live in, and this shrimp will be building the structure and keeping it tidy while the goby is sitting outside watching for predators.
Right. So what would happen if I got one without the other?
You can have one without the other, but it's more natural for them if they have their symbiotic partner.
Yeah, I'm not positive that anemones are aware that clownfish are there. Like, I honestly, like, I like to think of all life. Anemones are pretty. As if there's a simple life form, there's just one entrance, one exit. It's the same one. It's pretty. I'm not certain it's aware that there's a whole lot going on. I think that it knows which way light is, but I've had enough anemones flip upside down for no apparent reason and crawling around. I'm not even certain if they're really cognizant of where light is.
Yeah.
I've seen anemones. So another misconception people have is that you have to feed your anemones when you get them.
Yeah.
It's totally false, because if you have clownfish that are hosting your anemone, the clownfish will eat what they need, and then they'll take the food that they don't need and they'll spit it in the anemone, and they feed it little bits at a time, while the anemone at the same time is feeding from the light. So it has symbiotic algae cells inside of its cells that are basically using photosynthetic or using photosynthesis to create sugars that are feeding the anemone. So the anemone will grow exponentially just without any food in a tank by itself with a good light, good filtration.
Now, one thing about light too, in regards to location along the oceans and everything, I mean, we assume that, okay, there's nothing covering the ocean, but does light, let's say at the equator, different
Deep
from
water
light?
compared to longer light cycles compared to shorter.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you get. If you get a gigantic carpet anemone, it's going to need longer photo period with higher amount of light output, because it requires a lot of light.
Right.
If you get a bubble tip anemone from Sri Lanka, you're going to need 8 hours of 20% focus light. You don't need that much light for a bubble tip.
And that's another reason that we see a lot more blue lights utilized on saltwater. Is red pretty much disappears within 10, 12 feet. And most of these corals, I mean, arguably, you'll never find any of these where they are in this tank in the wild. You're still going down at least
6 to 10 feet.
Yeah, 6 to 10 feet at least. Sometimes up to 20 or 30. Now you can imagine going 30 foot down. What the color spectrum is. You've eliminated all your reds. All you're seeing is those blues and really sharp whites.
Yeah. Everything in the ocean when you go diving almost looks brown and green and yellow. If you take that exact same coral out and you put it under reef lights, it's going to be blue and green and pink and all different colors.
Anyone else have any questions?
Would biotope considerations also apply to this larger fish like angels?
Yes. So, say you wanted to have an angelfish tank in saltwater or freshwater? Saltwater. So if you wanted to have some bigger angelfish like emperor angels or queen angels, anything like that, you're going to want to look at the region they're from and what their diet is, because each region has different coral and different sponges available for these fish to eat. So, like, take for example a regal angel from the Red Sea. The Red Sea has tons of sponges. The regal angels feed specifically on sponges. So if you get a regal angel and you throw it into a tank with corin angels or blueface angels, anything from a different region, they're going to eat meaty foods when this regal angel is only going to eat sponge-based food. So normally the regal angel will starve out because it can't outcompete the other angelfish for food. And it's also not used to eating meaty diets. It's something that they have to be kind of weaned into. So the other thing is aggression also. Certain angelfish from certain areas are way more aggressive than, like angelfish from, say, the West Americas are going to be way more aggressive than angelfish from the Red Sea. So if you mix the two, you're probably going to have bad issues with fighting and stress levels in the tank.
Any other questions? All right, well, hey, I want to make certain and give a huge round of applause to David. Thank you for presenting. I think it was very informative, and honestly, you guys take a trip around the shop, find some stuff, get inspired, and got any questions, hit us up.
Okay, thanks.